the Bridge of Quiet Evenings. It was a small town by the river, where the streets were paved with cobblestones and the lanterns glowed like warm fireflies each evening. People knew each other by name, and every corner carried a memory of laughter, music, or secrets whispered between friends. Among these streets lived Elena, a young woman who spent her days painting the river and selling small sketches to the tourists who passed by. Her life was quiet, yet inside her heart there was always a sense of waiting for something she could not quite name. One spring afternoon, when the cherry blossoms were falling into the river, she saw a man standing at the old wooden bridge. He looked like a traveler, his clothes simple, his gaze fixed on the water below as though it carried away a story only he could understand. His name was Daniel. Their first conversation was not long. Elena had dropped her paintbrush into the river, and Daniel, without a word, climbed down to the edge of the bridge to retrieve it. When he handed it back to her, their fingers touched briefly, and in that fleeting moment Elena felt something stir deep inside, something both familiar and new. The days that followed were filled with unexpected meetings. Daniel would sit by the river reading while Elena painted, sometimes offering small comments that made her laugh. He told her that he was a writer who had traveled from city to city, searching for inspiration, but had somehow found himself staying longer in this quiet town than he had planned. Elena, he once said, as the sun was setting behind the hills, your town feels like a story that doesn't want to end. Maybe that's why I can't leave yet. She smiled, not daring to ask if she was part of that story. Summer came, and with it, long evenings filled with music and lantern festivals by the river. Elena and Daniel walked together through the glowing streets, their shoulders brushing, their hands almost but not quite touching. She showed him her favorite spots, the willow tree that bent over the water, the hidden staircase leading to the bell tower, the bakery that smelled of warm bread at dawn. Slowly, the bond between them deepened. Yet Daniel never spoke of staying. And Elena never asked. One night, as autumn leaves began to fall, Daniel confessed the truth. I came here running away from something, he said softly, his eyes lowered. The city was too loud, too fast. I lost myself there. I thought if I kept moving, I'd find peace. But somehow, here, with you, I feel like I've stopped running. Elena's heart trembled at his words. She wanted to tell him that she too had been waiting, not for peace, but for someone who would see her not just as a painter of the river, but as a woman with dreams, fears, and a longing to be loved. That night, under the lanterns that floated gently on the river, Daniel finally took her hand in his. But love, like the seasons, is never without its storms. Winter arrived, and with it came a letter for Daniel, an offer from a publisher in the city. It was the chance he had been waiting for, a door to the future he had dreamed of as a writer. He stood at the bridge, torn between two choices. The woman who had brought him peace, or the dream that had followed him for years. When Elena saw the letter, she smiled bravely, though her heart ached. You must go, she whispered. This town will always be here. And so will I. Daniel kissed her forehead, promising he would return. Yet promises are fragile things, easily broken by distance and time. Years passed. Elena continued to paint, her art growing more vibrant, filled with colors she had never used before. She often walked to the bridge in the quiet evenings, where memories lingered like shadows of lantern light. Some nights she wondered if Daniel had forgotten her, if their story had ended before it could truly begin. And then, one spring evening, much like the first day they met, she saw him again. Daniel stood at the bridge, older, but with the same gentle eyes. In his hands he carried a book, its cover painted with Elena's river. He had written their story, the town, the lanterns, the girl who painted by the water. And on the first page, he had written, "For Elena, who gave me a home in her heart when I had none." When their eyes met, there were no words needed. He had returned, not as a traveler, but as a man who had finally found where he belonged. And in the golden light of evening, as the river carried blossoms once more, they crossed the bridge together, no longer waiting, but finally beginning. Whispers of the Forgotten Cafe. The rain had just stopped when Emma pushed open the glass door of the little cafe tucked away Maple Street. She wasn't supposed to be there. In fact, she had walked past it hundreds of times in the past, never paying it much attention. But that evening, something about the warm light spilling from its windows, the faint sound of a piano drifting outside, and the promise of shelter drew her in. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a man sitting near the window with a book in his hands. His dark hair fell loosely over his forehead, and the way his lips moved, silent, almost as if he was tasting the words as he read, caught Emma's eye. She quickly looked away, embarrassed for noticing. She ordered a cup of coffee and sat at the far corner, pulling out her journal to appear busy. But every few minutes, her gaze drifted toward the stranger. When the waitress placed her coffee down, she whispered, "You're lucky. That man by the window? He comes here every Friday. Never talks to anyone. Only reads." Emma smiled politely, but curiosity bloomed inside her. An hour later, as she prepared to leave, she accidentally dropped her pen. It rolled across the floor, stopping right by his shoes. The man picked it up and looked at her. "This yours?" His voice was deep but gentle. "Yes, thank you," she replied, taking it from him. Their fingers brushed, and something unexplainable flickered in her chest. He closed his book, almost reluctantly, and asked, "Do you always write here?" "No. Actually, this is my first time." He smiled faintly, as if he found that answer more significant than she realized. From that night, the cafe became their place. Every Friday, Emma would return, sometimes pretending she just needed quiet to write, though deep down she knew she was waiting for him. His name was Daniel, a literature professor who found refuge in the little cafe after long weeks of teaching. He loved poetry, especially Rilke, and he recited lines with such sincerity that Emma often felt as though the words belonged to him. Over weeks and months, their conversations deepened. They talked about everything: books, dreams, childhood memories, fears they never admitted to anyone else. The world outside seemed to fall away whenever they sat across from each other. Yet, love never came rushing like in the novels they both adored. It unfolded slowly, delicately, like pages of a book turned one by one. One evening, snow fell softly against the cafe windows. Emma watched Daniel stir his tea absent-mindedly before he finally looked at her. "Do you ever think about what it means," he asked quietly, "to meet the right person at the wrong time?" Her heart skipped. "Do you think this is the wrong time?" He hesitated. "I don't know. But I know it feels right when I'm here with you." Emma reached across the table, her hand finding his. "Then maybe that's enough." Their love story didn't need grand gestures or declarations shouted into the world. It was found in soft glances, in laughter shared over spilled coffee, in the comfort of silence where words weren't necessary. It was a story written not in haste, but with patience, like a novel carefully crafted over years. And though life remained uncertain, one truth anchored them. Every Friday, beneath the warm glow of the cafe lights, Emma and Daniel chose each other. The Bridge of Silent Promises. On the outskirts of a small riverside town stood an old wooden bridge. It was neither grand nor remarkable, but it had witnessed countless seasons, storms, and whispers of passing lovers. For Elena, it was simply a bridge she crossed daily on her way to the bookshop where she worked. But for Adrian, a young architect returning to his hometown after years away, the bridge carried memories of childhood dreams, of youthful laughter, and of a girl he once knew but never confessed his feelings to. Adrian had been gone for nearly 10 years. His studies and work had taken him far, and in the rush of life, he had convinced himself that what he left behind was nothing more than nostalgia. But when he walked across that familiar bridge one autumn evening, he saw her, Elena, standing quietly by the railing, her hair catching the golden light of the setting sun. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was staring at the water below, lost in thought, just as she used to when they were younger. "Elena," he said softly. She turned, startled at first, and then her lips parted in disbelief. "Adrian?" The years seemed to collapse in that single moment. He saw the same warmth in her eyes, though time had added a quiet maturity to her face. She saw in him a man more confident, yet carrying the same gentle smile she remembered. They began to talk, first cautiously, about where life had taken them. Elena had stayed in town, managing the bookshop her family owned. She confessed that she loved the quiet rhythm of the place, the smell of old paper, and the way stories connected strangers. Adrian, on the other hand, had been moving constantly, big cities, tall buildings, endless deadlines. Yet, in all his travels, he never found the peace he had imagined. That evening stretched into night as they walked through the town, reliving shared memories. Adrian remembered how Elena used to sit by the bridge with her sketchbook, drawing the river and its restless ripples. She remembered how he once promised to build something lasting, a bridge that will never break, he had said when they were 15. In the days that followed, they met often. Sometimes at the bookshop, sometimes by the bridge. Adrian found himself lingering in the town longer than planned, canceling meetings and postponing deadlines. For the first time in years, he felt grounded. One evening, after weeks of rediscovery, Adrian brought Elena back to the bridge. The night was quiet, stars shimmering above, and the river murmuring below. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small sketchbook, the kind Elena used to carry. Inside were drawings of bridges he had designed, each with intricate details. On the last page, however, was something different, a simple drawing of the old wooden bridge in their town, with two figures standing on it. "This is the only bridge I never managed to rebuild," Adrian said. "Because I think it was never meant to be replaced. It's ours." Elena's breath caught. "Adrian, I spent years chasing things that didn't last," he continued, his voice low but steady. "But when I came back, I realized the one thing I truly wanted was never out there. It was here. With you." Tears welled in her eyes. For all the time apart, for all the words unspoken, there was still something between them, something that had quietly endured, like the bridge beneath their feet. She smiled through her tears and whispered, "Then don't leave again." And so, he didn't. Adrian stayed, and in the years that followed, he helped rebuild parts of the town, but he never touched the old wooden bridge. It remained as it was, weathered, imperfect, yet strong. Just like their love. Whenever townsfolk crossed it, they would often see Adrian and Elena walking hand in hand, sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing softly. To the rest of the world, it was just an ordinary bridge. But to them, it was the place where a promise, silent for years, was finally kept.